This man is going to jump to his death. He's standing on the highest floor in Brazil. His feet have reached the edge. One step further and he's in the abyss. Passers-by below the building are stunned. The police sent a helicopter to save him and called in the best psychiatrists after almost 3 hours of effort. But the expert was unable to negotiate because the man who was going to jump from the building is the most famous psychologist in Brazil. He knows more about the human heart than anyone else. While people were at their wits' end, a ragged old beggar came into the crowd. He looked up and said he could try. The passers-by sneered and said even the experts couldn't do anything. What can an old beggar like you do? The words just fell. The old beggar grabbed his meatloaf, then took the elevator to the top floor. The man on the other side took a last look at the crowd, then slowly closed his eyes. At that moment, the old beggar climbed over the window and Saturday down next to him. The psychologist was startled and took a few steps back.
Eu vou me jogar. Eu vou me matar.
The old beggar answered,
Eu tô comendo aqui. Quer parar de atrapalhar a minha refeição?
After saying that, he asked the man if he wanted to take a bite. At this moment, the police rushed to the scene and panicked. The last one has not been saved, and now there is another one who does not want to live. But the old beggar calmly said, everything is normal here. If you jump from the building, I will notify you. The police did not dare to act rashly but left first. The old beggar then said to the men they are gone, you can jump now.
É isso que você quer? Mas não pensa muito não, hein? Vai por mim. Se você quer se arrebentar, pula logo.
The old beggar then said, every 5 seconds, a person dies on this planet. It's not as if you're the last one. But the psychologist didn't listen. Obviously, this is a provocation. He continued to raise his arm to take the last step, but the old beggar suddenly interrupted the man again. He said he was a murderer. The psychologist was furious. How does jumping from a building make him a murderer? The old beggar told him that this jump of yours killed not only yourself, but also your family and friends, and those who love you. Hearing this, the psychologist couldn't hold on any longer. He took his son's photo out of his pocket. The old beggar struck while the iron was hot, taunted him that although he was an intellectual, he didn't realize that suicide was an escape. Then the old beggar asked him one question after another, completely broke the man's psychological defense. In the face of these questions, he could not answer any of them. Instead, he was enraged. Toward the old beggar yelled, do you know what I have lost? The old beggar asked in return, do you have as much as I have lost? He was dumbfounded by the question. Yes, no one can be more desperate than a beggar. And then the old beggar painted a change of style. Tone became gentle down, silently told his story. He was once a billionaire. He owns more than 100 companies. Despite being worth over $1 billion, he was so busy with his career that he neglected to spend time with his family. That day he came home late at night. His daughter was very angry. She asked her father why he didn't come to his dance performance, but her father just said he was too busy with work. He'll be there next time. The daughter was even more upset because her father always said next time, but he never kept his promise. That tycoon was speechless. He felt so sorry for his family, so he put off all his work. He decided to spend time with his family. The private jet was right in front of him, but at that moment, the cell phone rang once again. An important meeting had to be held.
Papai, eu e a mamãe preferimos te esperar.
Não, de jeito nenhum.
And he left in a hurry, leaving his wife and daughter with disappointment in their eyes. The tycoon got into his car and watched the plane go away. Suddenly, there was a loud bang in the sky. The plane exploded. His wife and daughter were killed instantly. He rushed like a madman to the wreckage of the plane. He crouched on the ground and cried, but nothing could be undone. At that moment, he realized how important his family was. It was as if his soul had been sucked out of him. He donated all his wealth. He buried his career with his wife and daughter in the grave. From then on, he became a beggar. He wandered the streets of the city. He called himself a dream seller to restore the faith of those who have lost their dreams. After hearing his story, the psychologist was very shocked. He asked the old beggar, what can you sell me? The old beggar smiled and said,
Uma pequena vírgula. Para que continuem a escrever sua história.
The psychologist was finally relieved. He decided not to run away, but to face his predicament bravely. No more playing with his life. The homeless man took him to his own house, as if to tell him, how can you give up so easily when people who have a harder life than you are trying to live it? The next day, the homeless man continued to guide the needy in the city. Gray, the hobo, came to a funeral service. At this funeral, the guests were laughing and joking, and there was not a trace of sadness in sight. The whole hall was filled with joy, but just a few minutes before, the funeral was a sad one. At that moment, an old beggar came in. He wanted to get some food, but looking at the dreary atmosphere of the hall, he felt sick all over. He complained loudly about the sadness. It's disrespectful to the dead.
Vocês estão tristes com sua ausência porque o estão deixando morrer no único lugar onde ele tem de se manter vivo. Dentro de vocês. O velório pode ser ambiente de lágrimas, mas deve ser acima de tudo ambiente de elogios, de recordações.
Then someone speaks up and says the man was a good man. He was stubborn, but he had a good heart. And the man's wife said he was loyal. Though he failed many times, he never gave up. The man's son said he was my best friend. The old beggar came to the boy and squatted down.
Então honre seu pai. Honre seu pai enfrentando seus medos.
Gradually, everyone began to tell the story of the man's life. The depressing atmosphere was swept away. The psychologist on the sidelines was touched. He wanted to talk to his son, but then he saw it on the news. The son was standing outside the window of the building, ready to commit suicide. The psychologist rushed over to the building. When the son saw his father, he broke down even more. It turns out the psychologist is a person who pursues extreme perfection. From the day his son was born, he practiced a strict upbringing. He demanded that his son be as perfect as himself. He never cared what he thought. Such an extreme parenting style distorted his son's mindset. Gradually, he became alienated from his father. And finally, he took the road to despair. The psychologist tried to get the son to come to him, but the son told him to get lost. I've been a burden to you since I was born. You've never been happy with me. Happy? The son became more and more agitated. He was about to jump. His father suddenly shouted. Then he closed his eyes and slowly moved his feet. His body was about to dangle in the air. The son looked at him in disbelief. He rushed over and hugged his father. He did not expect that he was so important in his father's heart. At this moment, the gap between father and son had finally been broken. Looking at his son, who was relieved, his father told him that if the road of life is not going to work, then put a comma so that you can continue to write your life.